We talk a lot about heartbreak, about missing someone, about moving on. But what happens when you're not just missing someone? You're stuck in them. When she left, he didn't just lose a relationship, he lost a part of his identity. And now he's not chasing her, he's chasing the memory of her. That's the trap. He's not in love. He's addicted. Addicted to the way she made him feel, to the version of himself he saw in her eyes, to the fantasy he's replaying on loop, night after night. And the worst part, he doesn't even realize it's not about her anymore. Today, we're going to break that cycle. We're going to expose the real reason we stay stuck in the past, and show how to finally get your power back. Love and longing often disguise themselves as the same emotion, but they couldn't be more different. When someone leaves and all you can think about is them, it's easy to tell yourself, this must be real love. I must have lost something extraordinary. But what you're feeling isn't necessarily love. It's the emotional equivalent of withdrawal. You're not just missing them, you're missing the constant stream of emotional input they gave you. And when that supply is suddenly cut off, it feels like you're gasping for air in a vacuum. When someone becomes a part of your daily life, your routines, your thoughts, your sense of safety, they become an emotional anchor. And when they're gone, you don't just lose a partner. You lose a sense of rhythm, a sense of balance. It's like your nervous system is waiting for the next message, the next look, the next text, and it never comes. That absence becomes the loudest thing in the room. But here's the dangerous parting. Your mind starts to interpret this intense emptiness as proof that they were the one. You feel so much, so often, that it convinces you what you had must have been rare and irreplaceable. If it hurts this much, it had to be special. But intensity doesn't equal compatibility. And pain isn't proof of depth. It's just pain. Addiction to the memory begins here. When you start mistaking your emotional reaction for the quality of the relationship, the emotional chaos becomes a measuring stick. You forget the arguments, the unmet needs, the small daily incompatibilities. You romanticize the moments that worked. You highlight the joy and crop out the discomfort. What you're left with is a curated version of the past, polished and bright, edited for nostalgia. But you can't heal from something while idealizing it. And that's exactly what keeps people stuck. It's also important to realize that longing has very little to do with the person who left, and everything to do with the part of yourself that you gave to them. You weren't just falling for them, you were falling for how you felt in their presence. In many ways, the pain you're feeling isn't even about their loss. It's about the disconnection from that emotional high. When you're in love, everything seems to make more sense. There's meaning in the mundane. There's someone to share the little wins and hold you through the lows. When that emotional mirror disappears, not just loneliness that follows, it's confusion. It's a kind of spiritual vertigo. People rarely realize this, but much of what we think is love is actually just the comfort of familiarity. It's the mind trying to cling to something it used to rely on for emotional regulation. It's a craving, like any other addiction, and the brain hates uncertainty. So it pulls you back to the last place you felt steady, even if that place is gone, even if it was never actually healthy. That's why you find yourself checking old messages, rereading conversations, listening to your song, like it holds answers. You're not just reminiscing, you're chasing the feeling you once had. And no matter how many times you revisit it, it's never quite enough, because it's not her you're missing. It's the sense of emotional certainty she gave you. So when people say, I can't let go, I still love her, the truth might be harder to hug. You're not in love. You're addicted to the memory of how love once felt. And until you separate that from who she actually was, you'll keep holding on to something that isn't even real anymore. When someone leaves and we find ourselves consumed by thoughts of them, it's easy to assume it's because they were extraordinary, that there was something uniquely powerful about them that we can't replace. But often, what we're really mourning isn't just the loss of that person, It's the loss of the version of ourselves that existed when we were with them. That version we liked. That version that felt loved, seen, chosen. It's not just her we're addicted to. It's who we got to be in her presence. When we fall for someone, we don't just fall for their laugh or their eyes or the way they made our coffee just right. We fall for how they made us feel about ourselves. They reflected back a version of us that felt whole, worthy, desirable, important. There's a kind of magic in that. When someone makes you feel like the best version of you, the version you maybe always hoped you could be, but never quite believed in until they looked at you that way. And when that's taken away, what we lose isn't just a partner. It's an identity. It's the man who suddenly had purpose because she believed in him. It's the guy who felt interesting because she hung on his every word. It's the person who felt secure because someone chose him every day, even on the ordinary ones. That's what vanishes in the breakup, and that's what keeps us stuck. We start to mistake her presence for the source of all that goodness. It's as if we believe, I was only that person because she was there. So we cling to her memory like a lifeline, not because we can't live without her, but because we don't know how to access that version of ourselves without her validation. This is one of the most painful truths of heartbreak, that the other person may have been the mirror through which we saw our best selves. And when they walk away, it feels like that version of us disappears too. It feels like we're left with the unremarkable, the flawed, the insecure parts they once soothed. It's a kind of identity whiplash. One day you're someone's everything. The next, you're no one in particular. That contrast is brutal, but what we rarely stop to realize is that the person we were in that relationship, that confident, funny, loving version of ourselves, was us. That person didn't come from her. She just helped bring it out. But it was always there, and it still is. It's just buried now beneath grief, doubt, and this false belief that we can't be him again unless she comes back. That's the addiction, not to her. To the feeling of being wanted, to the identity that flourished in her attention. And that's why moving on feels so impossible, because we don't think we're just losing her. We think we're losing us. But here's what's dangerous: as long as you believe that the best version of you existed only in that relationship, you'll stay emotionally anchored to it. You'll keep replaying moments in your head, not because you want to relive them with her necessarily, but because you're trying to reconnect to that empowered version of yourself. And the truth is, you don't need her to be him. You never did. The healing begins when you stop chasing the past as a way to access yourself, when you begin to realize that what she reflected was already inside you, and it still is. But as long as you confuse her presence with your value, you'll keep mistaking longing for love, and you'll stay stuck chasing a memory of yourself that you've had the power to reclaim all along. The mind is a brilliant but unreliable storyteller, especially when we're hurting. After a breakup, our memories don't play back like a documentary. They play like a highlight reel. We don't remember things objectively. We remember them emotionally. And when pain is involved, our brain tends to romanticize what we lost, not necessarily because it was perfect, but because it feels safer than facing what's true, that it ended for a reason. When someone leaves us, especially if we didn't want them to, we go into survival mode. The brain starts editing the past, cutting out the boring scenes, fast, forwarding through the arguments, and spotlighting the laughter, the kisses, the vacations, the little moments that felt like magic. Suddenly, she becomes the greatest thing that ever happened to us, not because she actually was, but because the pain has filtered the story. And once we're in pain, we look for meaning. We search for evidence that this was rare, that it mattered, that we weren't crazy to want it. So we rewrite the story to fit that narrative. We'll say things like, "We were so good together," when actually, most of the relationship felt inconsistent. Or, "She understood me better than anyone," when in reality, we felt misunderstood more often than we admitted. The mind skips over those contradictions because the emotional truth we want to hold on to, that this was something special, feels better than the rational truth, which might be that it just wasn't right. This is how we become addicted to the memory. We stop seeing the whole relationship and start clinging to a version that never really existed the way we think it did. We become obsessed with the version of her that smiled at us across the room, not the one who slowly began to disconnect. We hold on to the early version of the relationship, the honeymoon phase, as if that was the entire story. But every relationship has seasons, and sometimes we fall in love with the spring and ignore the fall. What's dangerous is that the more we replay this edited version, the more it becomes our truth. The mind gets attached to the version it's created. And then, when we try to move forward, every new person we meet gets unfairly compared to this fantasy we've been nursing. No one matches the memory because no one ever will. Real people aren't highlight reels. They're messy and human and imperfect. But the memory we're stuck on isn't. That's the emotional trap. Comparing someone real in front of us to a version of someone in our head who no longer exists, or perhaps never existed the way we remember. And every time we do that, we reinforce the addiction. We keep her memory alive, not because it helps us move forward, but because it gives us an illusion of connection, a way to feel close to something we've lost. The truth is, memory is not a historian, it's a sculptor. It reshapes, it softens the edges. It can make us believe we lost a soulmate when we really just lost comfort or routine. It convinces us that the pain means it must have been real love, rather than simply deep attachment. And until we learn to question that memory, to sit with the full, unfiltered version of the relationship, we'll keep living in a story that's only half true. We'll stay stuck in a movie we've recut in our heads, waiting for a sequel that's never coming. And all the while, real life, with its chance for new, healthier love, is quietly passing us by. Sometimes the pain of heartbreak becomes a strange kind of comfort, not because it feels good, but because it feels familiar. When someone leaves, especially if it wasn't our choice, we're left not only with sadness, but with a deep feeling of rejection. Like we weren't enough to be chosen, to be kept, to be fought for. And that kind of rejection hits the core of our identity. It's not just, she left. It's, I wasn't enough for her to stay. That thought is unbearable. So, instead of facing it head on, the mind finds a workaround. It clings to the pain. Grief becomes a shield. We start telling ourselves, I can't move on because I still love her. Or, I just need more time. But often, what's actually happening is we're choosing to stay in that grief because it feels safer than facing what it would mean to let go. Because letting go would mean truly accepting that she chose to leave. And if she did, that must mean something about us. About our worth, about whether we were enough. So instead, we hold on, we replay old moments, look through pictures, read old texts. We stay emotionally loyal to someone who has already moved on, because doing that gives us a sense of integrity. I'm still here because I loved her that deeply. But the truth is, we might be staying because it's easier than starting over. Because it's easier than being open again, vulnerable again, rejected again. There's a strange power in staying in love with someone who's gone. As painful as it is, it creates an emotional certainty. We know how it feels. We know the story. We know the sadness. Moving on means entering a space of uncertainty. And most people would rather feel a familiar pain than an unknown possibility. We convince ourselves that healing is about time, but healing is actually about choice. And sometimes we delay that choice because we don't want to face what it would actually require, confronting the fear that maybe we weren't enough. But here's the deeper truth. Her leaving isn't proof of your inadequacy. People leave for all kinds of reasons. Compatibility, timing, emotional readiness, personal issues that have nothing to do with you. But when you don't have those answers, your brain fills in the blanks with its own narrative. And usually, that narrative is cruel. It sounds like, if I had just been Morig, maybe she'd still be here. So instead of accepting her choice and beginning to rebuild your sense of self, you hang on to the grief like it's a mission. like your loyalty to her absence proves something, that it keeps the love sacred or protects your pride. But in reality, it's keeping you small. It's keeping you from reconnecting with who you are beyond her. Because as long as she is the one who defines your worth, then her leaving will always feel like a reflection of your value. This is what makes grief feel safer than rejection. Because grief, in a way, keeps the fantasy alive. It lets you believe that maybe, if circumstances were different, she would have stayed. It creates a space where she's still idealized, and where the breakup doesn't have to mean something painful about you. But the cost of that illusion is your growth, your freedom, your ability to build a life that isn't centered around someone who no longer chooses to be in it. Real healing only begins when you stop asking why she left and start asking what it would look like to choose yourself now, to step out of the story where you're not enough and into the reality where your value isn't dependent on whether someone stayed. Because grief might feel noble, but it's not your home, it's the bridge, and you're not meant to live on a bridge. You're meant to cross it. When someone holds on to the memory of a past love, it often looks like longing or heartbreak from the outside. But underneath, something else may be happening, something more protective. Sometimes, it's not really about her anymore. It's about using her memory as a kind of emotional shield. She becomes the reason he doesn't open up again, the excuse for why no one else measures up. And that story becomes safer than the truth he's afraid. It's incredibly common to compare new people to someone from the past, especially when that person left a deep emotional mark. But what we often fail to see is that this comparison isn't about the other people not being good enough. It's about us being scared to try again, because trying again means risking rejection. It means being vulnerable. It means possibly being let down again. And the memory of her, perfected over time, gives us a way out. We tell ourselves, no one makes me feel the way she did. And that's convenient, because if no one measures up, then we don't have to open our heart again. We don't have to put ourselves in a position where we could lose again. He's not necessarily waiting for her to come back. He might not even want her anymore, not truly. But the story of her, the love, the chemistry, the connection is still serving a purpose. It keeps him safe. It keeps him closed. It keeps him in control. And when you can blame the past for why you're not moving forward, you don't have to face the fear of the present. You don't have to answer hard questions like, what if I'm not enough for someone else? Or, what if I open up and it ends the same way again? Using someone's memory as a shield isn't a conscious decision. It's not like he wakes up thinking, I'll just block everyone out today by clinging to her. It happens quietly, subtly. He starts turning away from people who show genuine interest. He starts believing that no connection feels right. He romanticizes what was, and in doing so, he disqualifies what could be. And because he's only holding on to the best parts of her, the idealized version, it becomes impossible for anyone in real life to compete. No new person has a chance, not because they're lacking, but because they're real. Real people aren't perfect. They're complex. They take time to know and love. They require emotional risk. But the memory of someone we loved before is already edited, already safe. It's known, familiar, contained. That's why it feels easier, safer. Even if it's painful, it's pain we've gotten used to. We've already built a home inside it. This emotional shield becomes especially powerful if he hasn't fully dealt with the deeper fears the breakup brought up. Maybe it left him questioning his worth. Maybe it made him feel invisible, abandoned, or not chosen. And rather than go through all of that again, he stays guarded. The memory becomes a wall disguised as devotion. And while it might feel like he's honoring what they had, what he's actually doing is avoiding the vulnerability required to create something new. The danger in this is that life starts to pass by while he waits for a version of love that doesn't exist anymore, or maybe never did in the way he remembers. The more time goes on, the more distant he feels from the possibility of real connection, because no one ever gets close enough to see the real him. They're kept out not because they're wrong for him, but because he's still clinging to a story that tells him trying again is too dangerous. Letting go of that shield isn't about forgetting her. It's about choosing to stop using her memory as a reason to stay emotionally unavailable. It's about recognizing that the safety of not trying isn't worth the cost of never truly loving again. The turning point in healing doesn't come when time has passed or when someone new walks into your life. It comes in the moment you stop waiting for closure and start creating it yourself. So many people stay stuck in the memory of someone who left because they believe they need answers to move on. They think, if I could just understand why she left, or if she could just tell me it meant something to her, then they'd finally be able to let go. But that's a trap, because waiting for someone else to give you closure means you've handed them the keys to your peace. You've made your healing dependent on a person who is no longer showing up for you. The truth is, she may never explain. She may never come back to tie the story up with a neat bow. Maybe she couldn't give you the kind of love you needed. Maybe she wasn't ready. Maybe it wasn't as deep for her as it was for you. Or maybe it was, but she still had to leave for reasons that had nothing to do with you. Either way, she's gone. And if you're still sitting in the wreckage, hoping she'll return with the missing piece of the puzzle, you're going to stay broken longer than you need to be. Creating your own closure is about choosing to tell your version of the story. One where you don't make her the hero or the villain. One where you don't shrink yourself into the role of someone who wasn't enough. It's about reclaiming the power to decide what this ending means. Instead of seeing it as proof that you weren't lovable, you begin to see it as proof that you were brave enough to love deeply, that you showed up, that you risked something real. And now, you're choosing to take what you've learned and carry it forward, not as a wound, but as a wiser version of yourself. This is the shift that ends the addiction to memory, because as long as you're waiting for her to give you the green light to move on, you stay emotionally loyal to someone who's not choosing you anymore. You stay in limbo, and the longer you stay there, the more you lose sight of your identity without her. But the moment you decide to stop making her the authority over your healing, everything changes. You stop checking her social media for clues. You stop replaying conversations looking for hidden meanings. You stop needing her approval to forgive yourself and move forward. Taking ownership of your healing doesn't mean you stop feeling. It doesn't mean you forget her overnight. It means you understand that letting go is a decision, not a feeling. You won't wake up one day suddenly free of the past, but you can wake up and decide that today is the day you stop giving it control. That today is the day you begin to choose yourself more than you choose to hold on to her absence. There's a quiet kind of strength in saying, she left. It hurt, but I'm still here. I'm still worthy. I still get to love again. That strength doesn't always come with confidence at first. It starts as a whisper, a small choice, and grows stronger every time you remind yourself that your value didn't leave with her. The memory may still visit. The sadness may still come in waves. But when you take ownership of the story, you're no longer at the mercy of it. You're writing the next chapter. And that's when healing truly begins. Not when she comes back to explain why it ended, but when you decide it no longer has to define you. The truth is, she left. And that hurt. It carved a space in your life, in your chest, in your identity. And for a while, you filled that space with memories, with questions, with what ifs. You weren't just missing her. You were missing the version of you that came alive around her. But what you've been holding on to isn't love anymore. It's a story, a loop, a safety net that stopped you from stepping into the next version of your life. You don't need to keep worshipping the memory to prove it mattered. It mattered. You don't need to wait for closure to start healing. You get to choose your own peace. You get to choose your own value, with or without someone else's permission. The memory may always be part of you, but it doesn't have to be your prison. So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this: your past may have shaped you, but it doesn't get to own you. You're still here, you're still worthy of love, connection, joy. And this time, not because someone sees it in you, but because you do. This is your moment to stop looking backward and finally start choosing yourself.